Wrong stuff. Stop. We've done that. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Shelley Tasker Show. I'm streaming out of YouTube, Rumble, and StreamYard on Facebook. Good to have your company. Today's date is Tuesday, the 19th of March, 2024. Great guest lined up tonight. I feel quite honoured to get Farmer Pete on. For those of you that don't know Farmer Pete, I'm sure most of you do. Well, lots of you. But for Cornwall, this man has finally made it happen. I've been sitting on the back burner for a few months, along with others, waiting when the Cornish farmers are going to get out there and start doing things. Anyway, I'm going to bring in Farmer Pete, and we're going to have a nice little chat. Good evening, Farmer Pete.
Good evening, Shelley. Thanks for having me on.
No, thank you for coming. It's a real privilege. Thank you. Get to be one of the first. So, but before we get into the nitty gritty, Pete, can you tell us a little bit how you got your farming background, how you got into farming, and what sort of farming you're doing?
Well, I'm a bit of a rare breed, being a first generation farmer.
Wow.
We're getting a bit rare, more rarer than hen's teeth in some respects, but I come from a farming family in terms of, my family's always worked in the agricultural sector. My dad was milking cows straight out of agricultural college, and he worked in pharmaceutical supply. He had a partnership in a business that supplied agricultural supplies, and he also did some permanent electric fencing as well. So he's seen a few sides of the game, should I say, and I've always been around the sort of countryside, through travelling around to various places where he worked and we lived. Me and my mum ran a share farming operation in Lincolnshire as well at one stage, growing tomatoes and lettuce. So they're my earliest memories, were sort of hanging out in glass houses, and perhaps that's why I like polytunnels now. But I actually just came to work for other farms when I had a change of career at about 30 years of age, about 25 years ago, and I just loved the life straight away. I just learned horticulture, vegetable production. I've never done stock, never done the animal side of things, but I worked for a couple of farms, learned the ropes that way for 5 or 6 years, and then had an idea to form a salad leaf company down here in Cornwall because, well, there wasn't one, and I became interested in, the Cornish food provenance issue. What's Cornwall famous for? What's its brand perception, food-wise, should I say? And, I always remembered travelling back up country and seeing tribute ales for sale and in pubs, and Ross Gillies ice cream here and there, and it was always a little reminder of back home, and that just got me thinking, what else could be in the brand recognition portfolio for Cornwall? And I just thought salad. It's very popular in California and places like this. The bagged salad market was taking a lot of market share over head lettuce, sort of 15, 20 years ago. It was all the new thing. So I just decided to have a play around with that, and just learn how to do it by watching other people do it, and with the machinery that was available from the rocket industry. This is where it all grew out of. All the sort of bandsaw harvesters and the roller drills and everything that are used in salad leaf production all come out of the rocket industry, which was getting going by the 70s and 80s. So I just really had some advice from the people that I bought machines from, and I just had to play with it, and it just grew and grew by itself. I just produced a mixed salad bag for chefs, and the original people that I supplied it to said, this is lovely stuff, it's fresh, it's different to the stuff that comes in from elsewhere. That's from Vale of Evesham in the UK primarily, but also from Italy, in the harder parts of the winter. And they said, can we have some more? So I just kept going with it. And before you knew it, we were up to just over 20 acres, with a small agricultural business, 4 people full time and 6 or 7 part time in the pack house during the production season, which went from April to September. And yes, we built the business up over 17 years to become Cornwall's largest independent salad leaf grower. And in 2019, we produced 40 tons of salad leaf from the fields here in West Cornwall. So
Wow, that's a
that's
lot.
really how I got to where I am now. And then, of course, COVID came along, and that derailed the business. We always sold a small amount of salad leaf to local shops, retail outlets. But actually, when we looked at the figures, we were surprised. It was actually only 5% of the business. So 95% of our turnover instantly stopped. So we had to just completely pack up and just wait and see what happened. I just went back to my first market gardening roots and just put a few crops of stuff in, sowed some carrots and some courgettes and did a few of the bits, and we operated an honesty box at our farm gate originally during COVID, and of course that was fantastically received with it, being in that period. If you remember, everyone was trying to source local and they had time on their hands and stuff. So, everything just flew out up there, and we had such lovely comments about, how fresh and nice the produce was that, I did more and more of that. And of course, over time, people were asking for eggs and bread and can you get milk? So we put an online store together, a web store, and we operated a click and collect from the farm. And we did that for about 18 months. And by the end of it, we were up to about 30 suppliers, all Cornish, with Trink Dairy, the excellent milk from there, Penny's Pies, for example, with shellfish and all various bits and bobs going on. So that was a great experience and a great way to survive COVID. And then coming out of that, we made the decision, based on age really, that are we going to continue and get back on, a sort of full-time 100-hour week farming mission. My parents, who have always been an integral part of the business in many ways, they're in their 80s now, and I'm in my prime, should I say. But 100-hour weeks aren't the easiest thing when you're getting on a bit. So we decided to not jump back on the big commercial salad leaf thing, and I've now just got an acre of no dig organic market garden, and about 5 acres of mixed veg in the field with some sunflowers and things, and I'm just surviving on that sort of part-time income really, but still there, still very interested in it, still loving it, and we've got a little bit of on-farm storage now, so we've had to diversify a little bit to get some extra farm income. With regard to the farm protest movements, I was obviously watching the developing scene on Telegram especially, and just taken aback by the scale of it. And, that really got me, looking into it and what it was all about. And it was a bit of a renewal of things that I dipped into earlier on in my life with, Agenda 21 and the green agenda, should I say. I've sort of dipped in and out of things like this with just the things I've read and studied over the years. I became very aware of the geoengineering weather modification when that started happening in the UK skies, and became concerned about that and campaigned for that for a while. But then, things move on, family issues and things like that, sort of, and work sort of put me back into the normal pace of life, should I say. But this has re-inflamed some old passions and some interest in politics, geopolitics, and farming generally. So I'm really enjoying it, and we had such a great response to launching the group that it was a wonderful day out on Saturday. And
Yes,
thank
it
you
was.
so much for all your efforts on the megaphone there. Um,
I was born to hold a megaphone, but no, I can shout. But
we had a better response than we could have wished for, both from the farming community and from the general public. So we've had a wonderful launch, and now we're moving on. We're continuing to grow the group by various means, and we are putting the work in place behind the scenes to put our agricultural reform proposals together. So we're reaching out to different farmers in the different sectors, and we're studying the scene ourselves. And the next stage moving forward is to get some proposals together and then start talking to some of the political representatives in the area and seeing what they're saying, and we're going to add our voice to the the groups that are already out there that are campaigning to improve things in the farming sector, and specifically adding our voice to the cause of trying to get rid of the 2008 Climate Change Act and getting rid of some of the net zero 2050 carbon emission targets that
so what does
a lot of
what
these.
does the 2008 Climate Act involve then? I haven't looked at that.
Well, that is the act from which the net zero 2050 carbon emission targets derive.
Right.
So you to turn the green bus around, you've got to get rid of that and repeal the legislation for the targets that derive from it, because the crazy situation that you have is that even if the government or some parts of the government try to say, look, these 2050 targets are kind of crazy, we need to actually not do a bit of this, not fund this so much, for example, then lawyers step in and say, actually, you're breaking your own legislation here that's under the 2008 Climate Change Act, so you're not going to get away with it. You've got to fund this, and you've got to commit financially and otherwise to these targets laid out in the legislation. So there can't really be much serious reversal of the net zero agenda until the 2008 Climate Change Act is gone.
Right, I understand. Yeah. And I mean, I've looked at charts for the 2050 agenda, and I mean, by 2050, I mean, they're presuming, aren't they, that there'll be like a reduction of 60% of beef, lamb. I don't know what
Well,
we're going to be.
we're already seeing it. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
even this week in the Farmers Weekly, there's a forward projection for 2025 on beef herd and suckler herd numbers, and they're down 5%. So, there's always a bit of annual variation with these, obviously, and there's seasonal weather taken into account, and but looking at the wider picture, it's not surprising given the pressure and to reduce numbers like this and the other pressures on farmers, financially, etc. That it's no surprise that people are planning lesser herd numbers and perhaps thinking of retiring and taking the farm exit scheme little bonus at the end to finally get you out the way, should we say?
That does look quite appealing, doesn't it? I was
It's
looking at
certainly
that
one way of
earlier.
looking at it. But anyway,
It's a way out, but it's not about that, is it? But what strikes me with that document on the government website is that, we're buying you out, we're giving you the opportunity to leave, but then supposedly we're going to get other people in to do the same job as you.
yeah,
That just makes no sense
yeah,
whatsoever.
yeah.
Yeah.
You
So,
know
I mean,
that could
sorry, carry
that
on.
could open things up to another bigger farmer to expand and get onto a bigger economy of scale, which would be okay. But it could also open up the opportunity for that land having to be sold, and then you're opening it up to corporations buying it, and that's slightly more worrying.
And this is all aimed at the whole CO2 problem, isn't it?
Yes, it's such a huge part of it. Um, um, that funding hasn't massively changed for farming over the years. The government funding is still at about 2.4 billion for the sector, but it's the change in the political nature of the funding. It's the coercion in the funding that's the issue. It's the go green or go home kind of attitude to it, and that's happened very recently. That's the recent twist and turn in it. The basic payment scheme in the original days was just about maintaining a small payment so that landowners kept land for agricultural use as a reserve national asset, so it could be spun up in times of war or disaster to provide more food for people. And it was non-politically biased, of course. There was always environmental schemes, hedgerow management schemes, and these were always beneficial things. You could get a little bit of extra money for putting your land into an organic conversion scheme, an organic land management scheme, in which case you leave the hedgerows to go a bit more bushy and this sort of thing for the nesting birds. That's always great. That's good. It encourages farmers, not that they need it, to think that way and to get a little bit of extra money for those things. But the basic payment scheme really was really just a small amount of money to help with the maintaining of your land, which is essentially a national asset. It's an offset of the costs in reality for maintaining a piece of land. Going back historically, figures of about £60 an acre are in the general ballpark of what you would get for regular land. Well, you can't. That's not going to pay for very much when you consider that as a farmer or a landowner, you have to deal with things like mature trees blowing over in winter storms, which is just a naturally occurring event. Collapses of stone walls, drainage needs putting in, ditches need clearing out, annual hedge trimming. All these things are tasks that have to be done just to keep the place shipshape in order to produce food. So in reality, the basic payment scheme was really just a contribution towards the cost of that. The comment that you sometimes hear from people about, farmers lounging around just existing on benefit payments from this subsidy scheme is nonsense. They really were only ever contributions towards running costs. But as I said, the later change of the landscape with it is the introduction of the green schemes, where the bigger money is for doing anything to do with rewilding or even growing actual crops but not harvesting them.
Explain that phrase, rewilding. What does it implicate?
Well, rewilding is a general term that covers, things that people also call butterfly schemes. It's growing game crop mixes. It's even growing actual human food crops, wheat, oats, barley, and not harvesting them and leaving them for the birds and the wildlife. So it's annual cropping, so it's not taking production out into an orchard, for example, and planting trees. It is still some form of field production, but it's for wildlife use or non-harvested for non-harvested food for wildlife use. So, and the difference in the financial subsidy is really noticeable. For example, in England, for permanent pasture, low input permanent pasture. So this is just standard grazing land that you don't need to put much fertilizer on, just for grazing. The current subsidy is £151, and if you grow non-harvestable edible cereals, it's 1,072. So we're talking 8 or 9 times the subsidy is available for growing game mixes or actually not harvesting food. So you can't really blame the struggling farmers sometimes for opting to do a few hectares of that, because it's going to make quite decent money. So this is worrying. It's just one of the little niggling things that are coming in, that all add to the general picture of this green agenda coercion in subsidy support. And we're getting things like that here in England, but of course in Wales, under the sustainable farming scheme there, they are the next level above that. They're, in my opinion, being used as a pilot and a trial with the scheme that's laid out by the Welsh Government to mandate 10% of every farm to be in trees and 10% of every farm to be in some form of rewilding scheme in order to be able to get your farm subsidies.
But you're losing 20% of your land.
So if you had no, if you were completely, fields just grow productive fields, you would lose 20. I mean, in reality, most farms have got a few percent of trees, and most farmers do some form of rewilding scheme for the subsidy in marginal areas, perhaps flood prone areas. These are all good ideas and always have been. If it's not prime agricultural producing land, it makes complete sense to grow something that is perhaps a bit more flood resistant or something, in these areas, or help the wildlife out a bit. But mandating it to happen to a set degree in order to get your subsidy is a totally different deal. And, it's causing a lot of upset because farming is already struggling. It really is the straw that's broken the camel's back.
How long would you say that farming has been, the farmers have been struggling then? Is this more since COVID, or is it like a long term? Because I always used to think farmers, they're all rich, they've got tractors, they've got land.
Well,
find a farmer.
That's not in debate. What you're looking at are transgenerational farm businesses that have gone on for many generations, and that your forefathers have worked for and grown and passed on, and they're a very important part of the structure of our system here, our political system, which people quite often don't account. That there's a very important separation of powers with our independent farming landscape, because the opposite of that is state control, and that's communism. If one entity owned all the land and was responsible for the food production on it, that's the communist model. And then the authority has complete control over what's grown, how much is grown, and who gets the food. So our independent family farm business model is a very good security. It is a separation of powers, the same as the independent judiciary is supposed to be in this country, as is the two houses of parliament against the monarch, as was put in place by the Magna Carta to protect against a tyrannical king. So, yes, that a lot of farmers are wealthy. Some of them are wealthy, some of them aren't. That's not really of a concern. And the other thing that people quite often see is, all these hundreds and thousands of pounds worth of machinery going around and looking very impressive. Well, actually, lots of it is on farm finance. So, yes, there are big businesses, and people do get wealthy in farming if you hit it right and get it right, and if the government support is right, and quite rightly so. We shouldn't be clipping the wings of this, because it's so important to the country, not only in food supply, food security, but as I said, for the continuance of the separation of powers that we have from an independent family-owned farming setup.
Yeah, I've seen one story last week. I mean, I'm sure there's loads more of people that have had to say bye to the family farm that's been in the family for, over 100 years. And I think, well, lots of people don't think about this. Like you say, it's a family tie. It's everything, isn't it? It's I can't think of the right word, but it's part of you if you come from that line of farmers and that farm's been going for so long and it's now got to close. When you got to sorting out this rally that was held on Saturday, when you've approached other farmers, were they aware of what's really going on and what it's all about? Do they think you're a bit barking mad, saying, there's no CO2 problem and stuff like that?
Um,
Or are they
it,
believing the news?
it was a case of complete polar opposites, as you've actually just touched on. Some of the people we talked to at the livestock market before were 100% sort of on message, should I say. They were aware, and pretty much everything we said on the flyer, and explaining about the money power behind politics when you zoom out a little bit with organisations like the World Economic Forum and the United Nations, where all this sort of comes from, how they are controlling and owning politics, along with the sort of media complicit with them, etc. Some people were absolutely yes, of course, yeah, but a large amount, also more, I would say, are not aware, and there was certainly an air of resignation, really. I would call it. I mean, they are an older community that go to the livestock markets. Generally speaking, it's normally the older boys that go while the younger lads are still out actually working. But that said, there was I sensed just an air of sort of resignation and all a bit down in the dumps, really, and it's like somebody needs to give them hope again that everything's going to be all right. They need some support from the nation, is what they need, and that touches on the topic of mental health in farming, which all of the campaign groups are talking about. The Farmers for Fairness, Save British Farming, the two groups that are planning the tractor rally up to Westminster on Monday, they both have mentions of that in their sort of statements. And farm mental health is a big issue. It's suicides are rising, sadly, in the farming sector. Not only is it one of the most dangerous injuries for fatal accidents, but farm suicides are now approaching one a week. So
Wow.
that's an indicator that that's the canary in the mine that things aren't going well. You're combining financial pressure, financial uncertainty, with loneliness and being cut off on remote farm locations, and the whole weight of the world on your shoulder. Are you the generation that's not made this thing work? You've got pictures of your father, your grandfather, your great grandfather, etc., on the walls in the farmhouse, and it's on your watch that this is going down the pan. And if you're not aware in the wider political sphere, and perhaps seeing the manipulations that are going on and the wider power plays that could be happening, and you're tending to self-blame, thinking, oh, I should have done that crop last year, or I was a bit late putting that in, or I shouldn't have had that holiday, or whatever it is. These are things that are really small things, but they can get echo chambered in the loneliness and the tiredness of long winter working days, and this is how it happens. So yes, mental health on farms definitely needs attending to, but of course I think both me and you know that in the allopathic sense of things, that is treating the symptoms of the disease rather than attacking the root cause. The root cause is a lack of nationalistic respect and a lack of nationalistic approach to farming and British farmers, despite the continual stream of those words coming out of Rishi Sunak. There is, when you dig down into it, so much that could actually be done. A completely different approach and a completely different position could be taken by this government to actually back the farmers. And a point that highlights that is the dairy legislation that's going through Parliament at the moment. This is the contract price legislation that came about because some dairy farmers are on fixed contract prices, And in 2021, 2022, they saw huge raises in their input costs. And when they went to the supply chain purchaser, Arla, whoever it is, they're sort of saying, wow, I know we've contracted in at 32 pence a litre here, but I'm working out my input costs and I need to be at 42 selling out. Can you help me? And they were saying, no, not much we can do about it.
The supermarkets that are just profiting.
Yeah,
from
can't
this.
do anything about it.
Because they're on a contract. Because they're on a contract, presumably.
Correct. So
yeah.
every time the tanker is turning up, they are losing money. I mean, how long can you do that for? How much fat have you got on the bone of your farming operation to see that through to your next renewal date on the contract? So that this legislation is valid, and there are some valid points in it. But the most obvious point of it all is, why can't the government just side with the farmer and fix the price? If you fix the price at a fair price that's always going to return a profit to the farmer, everything will calm down. The nation will be more secure. Farm investment will be secure. The knock-on consequences will certainly be advantageous. But they just won't do that. When I read the proposals of the legislation, I got excited. I thought, oh, wow, fantastic. The government are actually listening. They will actually just step up and be brave enough for the nation to fix the price. But guess what? There's everything in there except fixing the price. It's really an exercise in how to draw up a contract. Well, if you've been in business for a few years, you don't really need a lesson in how to draw up a contract. Although some of the things are advantageous. They are in the favour of the farmer. But like I say, the main thing is missing. So you've got this scenario where you've got three essential links in a chain. You've got the retailer, you've got the supply chain company, and you've got the farmer. They all need to be treated fairly, and they're all asking for the support. What does the government do? Well, in my opinion, the sensible thing to do is to take it back to a religious or godly perspective, should I say, which is where all our law comes from. And you think, where is the creative process happening here? Which part of this process is closer to the Lord, shall we say? Is it the end retailer? No. Is it the supply chain company? No. Is it the farmer? Well, you're getting a bit closer. It's the cow. It's the holy cow. The creative work of the Lord comes from the cow making of the milk. And the farmer, by association, who husbands that process and is closest to it, is in that category. So when you look at the three chains, the one that I would support would be the farmer. I would say to the farmers, I'm going to fix the price for you because it's in the best interest of food security and securing the nation and the long-term security of farming. And the supply chain and the end retailer are going to have to play second fiddle to it because that's just the way it works. But of course, we know in reality, the lobbying and the funding doesn't come so much from the farmers, or hardly any. It comes from the other two in the chain. So this is how politics plays out. The most sensible and support for the actual people that do the job in terms of the farming, the position that's best for food security and the national interest is overridden by the other two. So
yeah, but it's all part of the plan, isn't it, Pete? The whole Agenda 2130. It's all part of the plan to get rid of the farming industry. We will be eating bugs. We will be growing meat at home. I don't know if you've seen that one.
Yes, I mean, yeah, it's hard to deny that it's happening. You look around, you check yourself constantly. Am I in an echo chamber? Your filter of critical thinking in your mind is constantly working overdrive. We have to stay very aware of misinformation and the world of deception that we live in. But once you've sort of been in that space for a while, knowing and reading a little bit about the power behind politics and just the general agendas, and having seen them play out, and being old enough to actually have seen those sort of come to fruition and grow in your lifetime, yes, it's hard to deny it. I mean, I first became aware of the green agenda, should I say, over 10 years ago, when I read Behind the Green Mask by Rosa Quare, which was a very interesting book that really laid out the case that the green movement has been hijacked and it's been weaponized, um, for the destruction of the democratic free world, so that it can be replaced with a one world communist, one government communist model. And like I say, 10 or so years ago, you might have perhaps been considered, the crazy conspiracy theorists at the fringe of society. But if you fast forward 10 or 12 years now, with the World Economic Forum and the UN standing out there loud and proud, with 178 countries flying in to Davos to get their instructions for the next annual rollout of the plan of the Sustainable Development Goals, it's kind of hard to to ignore that this is actually happening. So it's undeniable in my opinion, which is why I'm so passionate about telling people about what I think about the net zero agenda, and trying to dig down and sort the good from the bad, because there is good in there with all environmental land management and things, and with technology there's all good as well. But you have to be able to work out what is agenda and what's not, and how much to have of it. So there's detail in there, and you have to tread very carefully with people, because in my experience, people are very passionate about this on either side of the argument. And the reason for that there are a couple of reasons for that, in my opinion. One is that there's goodness in all of us about the environment. We all like the environment. We all want to pass a better world on. And when that sentiment or psychological foundation has been manipulated in the way that it is, I think it's hard for people to know and to even come to terms with it. They just believe they're doing the right thing for the planet. So
because they've been brainwashed into doing that. Yeah.
Yes,
That's all
and
they
also
see.
there are other wider factors that have attacked us as a people psychologically. Our psychological foundations have been attacked for many decades. Our original Britishness, should we say, attacks on our family values, our culture. These come under the wider remit of cultural Marxism. Attacks to the beauty of our art, to the beauty of our architecture. Things aren't being made beautiful anymore. Buildings, they're Soviet-style, cold corporate facades. There aren't any beautiful decorative town halls being made like there still are in places of like Hungary and Central Europe. So we've got a big hole in us as a people. I really believe it. We've been attacked and undermined psychologically, and what that does is it breaks it down and it leaves a vacuum, and nature hates a vacuum. If you plough the land over, it's no more than a week before the weeds start appearing. And when you've got a vacuum in your psychology or in your soul, then when something else comes along to fill it, there's a tendency that you will be very, very passionate about it. It gives you a new identity, it gives you a new purpose. And I really feel that there's quite a lot of people, especially in the stereotypical middle classes, that have become involved in Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion and things like that, that this is one of the second reason why they are so religious about it, for use of a better word. It has become a cult and it has become a religion. And it is very difficult to talk them down to
Yeah.
your point of view, or talk them around to your point of view. And of course, it is difficult to deal with a science argument. If you've ever watched Paul Burgess on YouTube, he's got a YouTube channel called Climate Realism. He lives in Wales, and he's an ex water board sort of. He was in charge of managing water resources and dams and sort of drought planning and flood planning and that throughout the UK. Really knowledgeable guy, and he's been appearing on GB News um, um, as the against the narrative side, and Jim Dale and others have been on the alarmist side, should I say, and they've had some really lively debates. But and Paul Burgess is very well informed, and even somebody of his caliber, it's quite difficult to have a scientific argument at pace and to get your point across, and also because the science is it's politicized. It is politicized on the alarmist side, and that has to be taken into account as well. And there is no doubt some politicized science from the fossil fuel side as well. So it's hard work to work it all out and find the right way. But what I always do is I try to focus out a bit of the detail and the noise. I try to just sort it out by thinking about protocols of what is the best interest for the nation. And at the end of the day, if there's a kind of a debate, which there is a huge scientific debate about this, about whether the anthropogenic element of carbon dioxide is actually anywhere near as bad as the alarmists are saying in terms of driving temperature or the rate of it, etc., then just default to your position of settling with the best interests of the country and the nation and the people, and don't go too far down the path of spending too much money on it, or risking your energy security or your food security. Just deploy the precautionary principle and see how you go. But that's of course not what we've got. We've got the heavily politicized thrust on this, and we've gone in way too far, and the spending on it is just unbelievable. It's unbelievable in cost when we're struggling in so many other ways. I mean, apart from the energy security and the food security elements to it, just the public spending and the lack of what we've got, the cost of living that we're all feeling. Everybody is feeling it. When I go out and about and I go and talk to people, just strike up a conversation with people in my local area here, Falmouth and Truro, the conversation that comes up quite often comes around the Ships and Castles place, the leisure centre that was closed down because there's not enough council funding. So the parents are all looking around trying to find a cheaper place to actually teach their children to swim, which we can't find. And you're driving around trying to avoid the potholes in the road. And yet 20 billion has just been announced for a new project up at Drax in South Yorkshire to bury the CO2 emissions into the ground. So this is 2,000 million, the first wave of funding for the project, so there will be more to come. Because of net zero emission targets, the madness continues. We know there's nothing wrong with CO2. The more of it, the better. We need more CO2. But their policy is to spend another 20 billion of our money to bury it in some way under the ground so it doesn't go out into the atmosphere. So this is on top of changing Drax to burning wood chip pellets, which have to come from America. So if you're not familiar with the power plant up there, it's the UK's biggest power plant at 4 gigawatts, and it was converted. The coal was shut down. It's 9 miles away from one of the richest, best quality coal seams in the world, and because of the CO2 issue, the whole place was converted to burn wood chip pellets, which have to come from America and Canada. So thousands of hectares of forest and trees are being cut down. Energy is being expended to wood chip them, dry them, pellet them, transport them by ship to the UK, transport them off the ships onto trains to take them to the power station to be burnt. A whole operation which actually costs 30% more carbon dioxide to run this place as essentially a wood burning stove instead of the coal fired power station that it was before. The whole thing's a nonsense because China's just opening up more coal-fired power stations, nearly every couple of weeks. So even if the CO2 argument was relevant and valid, which it isn't in my opinion, there's no difference anyway because the emissions are just getting sent over to China.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
This is an example of the spending. So, we're driving around, passing out when you check out at the supermarket at your weekly shop because of the cost of living crisis. Driving around with potholes and can't find anywhere to swim. I mean, I've been thinking about phoning my local supermarket and asking them to put a chair at the end of the place where you check out, so that when I have the bill told to me, I can actually sit down. Because I've got 5 children. I'm caring for my elderly parents, so I do some of their heavy shopping for them as well. I mean, we're in a lucky position. We're pretty much self-sufficient in vegetables for most of the year because of my line of work, but we still admittedly have to go to the supermarkets to buy the basics and other bits and bobs. But we're talking about some shops are £300 and £400 a week for a family with a couple of parents. I mean, these are, I just, when it goes through, when she tells me the price, I just have these flashbacks about when I was traveling in my younger days and taking holidays to do island hopping around Greece and travelling to Cappadocia and the central regions of Turkey in my sort of student days. And £300 was a serious budget for flights, ferries. You could get a holiday out of that, and yet this is what we're spending more than that just on a weekly shop for, admittedly a larger family than the average, but even so. Yeah,
it's crazy. It is crazy, and I can't see it stopping now. And obviously we've got the whole housing problem as well, and that just makes me feel sick to the stomach because I know so many people that need homes to live in, and I've got a friend in like a mobile home with 4 children, and all of this money is going on things like this.
Absolutely.
There's got to be some big hoo-ha to stop this, and I mean, I wonder like where the farmers are going. Do you think it will get to the point when they say, right, we're on strike? As frightening as that is, that's something I think, is that going to make them, whoa, we've got to stop and listen?
Well, all I can say to that is I hope it doesn't get to that, obviously.
I don't, but I would understand why they would do it. We could almost go back to rationing, couldn't we? For a month or something.
I mean, we haven't seen any significant sort of backing up of that theory. The large protests that have been happening in Europe, as far as I made out and as far as I've read from it, these huge protests have only so far resulted in the European Union saying, okay, we will push back the agenda a little bit. We'll add 5 or 10 years to certain projects that we were going to bring. I may be wrong on that. I'm not completely, keyed into it, but that's the only bit I've heard. There has not been any significant, yes, we are definitely going to stop all of this. We'll have a total rethink. We're sorry. There's things like we'll push back the mandating of no more petrol and diesel vehicles for, to 2035 as opposed to 2030. Things of that nature. So, in other words, nothing significant. And in fact, in relation to the Sustainable Farm Scheme proposal in Wales, a couple of weeks ago, this was up for sort of rediscussion and revalidation, should I say, in the Welsh Parliament. And hey presto, they passed it. And Mark Drayford, who's now stepped down, kind of said, yeah, you're just going to have to get on with it to the Welsh farmers. You're just going to have to do your bit for CO2 capture and the climate. So just get on with it.
It's mental.
Yeah, so far I can't see any major bending of their agenda. So I think we need to be mindful that we are in for the long haul, and we could be in for a bit of a shindig.
Yeah, to put it bluntly. Yeah, to put it mildly. Well, we've only got a few minutes left, Pete. God, that time's gone quick, hasn't it? You said, "Oh, if I've got enough chat, we'll go on." You're a good talker. Great to have. So, like, moving forward from this week's protest, which was amazing, and well done to everybody who helped out and took part in that. And I like to think, like, in Cornwall, there's a big network of people that are up against all of this thing, and everybody comes together. And I was so surprised the amount of people there. And it's quite, I've been going to protest for a few years now, and you all meet up with the same sort of like-minded people and stuff, and people are really up for it. And I think we can say that there's probably going to be something similar at some point soon. And I think the idea, is not necessarily going to bring about change, but is making people see what's going on. The amount of people that were gathering, and when you told them, like, all these tractors are going to be coming in a moment, they were all hanging around, and I was just shouting out a few odds and sods, but they were listening. And if it just makes one little person go home and think, oh, I'm going to have a look at that. I've seen this flying around on the internet for months. And like I said, I kept thinking, when are the Cornish people going to do it? And hey ho, Farmer Pete, you achieved it. And, I know there's lots of people behind the scenes as well. They're out there doing their bit. There's so many people that have put their heart and soul into making that happen. And, we got a good fight. I think we've got a good fight on our hands anyway.
We have, absolutely. I'm only the guy that started the group on Facebook. Really, there's many.
That's all we need. One person, isn't it?
Yeah,
and that's how it starts.
There's many great people who've already come forward to support and help with the group, and it's just growing and growing. And in fact, it's growing very quickly. It's been one of the nicest things to see that every time I log on, there's another 5 or 10 people join the group. We're over 700 people in the Facebook group now in just a little bit over 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So it's going very well, and it was just lovely to have a sense of unity between farmers and the general public, and a sense of believing in yourself again, believing in us, even in our Cornish bubble. And it's the sort of unity that we need to relearn and revisit and become more comfortable with, because we have been divided in almost every way possible by this adversarial system. We've been taught to not respect or love our elders or listen to them. We've been, taught to be individualistic and to be hedonistic and consumeristic, and to not feel allied between the wealthier or the poorer in society. These are the real roots of proper socialism, when everybody works together for the greater good and can feel unity. This is the magic of it. And it's just lovely to feel that and the farmer public dynamic really displays that. It really highlights it, that we are together. Farmers need the general public to eat their food, so they need the end consumer, and the end consumer needs the farmer. So it doesn't matter how rich you are, it doesn't matter how old you are or young you are or anything. We're interconnected and we need each other, and then we need to be together as a nation. We need that. We really need to feel that again in so many ways.
Definitely.
To reshape the political landscape in this country. It's so overdue now. That globalism. Globalism is the era of globalism has got to be over. I advocate for free market competition. It's it's quite often misunderstood when you talk about nationalism or socialism or these kind of things, that you're somehow a sort of communist thinking, or you're perhaps a bit of a Luddite, or you advocate for the Stone Age with use of technology or robotics in this and that, or automation in farming and things like that, or even green technology. Green technology is fantastic, and every technology should be fully explored and developed as well as we can. But it's the application and the political use of it is where the devil is. And for example, miscanthus grass in flooded areas, what a wonderful thing. You've got marginal farm areas that are prone to flooding, and there's a biofuel crop that is really easy to grow for a long period. And if you have a wet season and you can't harvest it, you can just leave it for the next year and cash in the calories the next season. So, there's places for all of this. And with regard to solar power and wind power, if you're on a mountainside off the national grid in the middle of nowhere, then solar power and wind power is the absolute everything for you. And it is a fantastic thing. But to have 37% of our national energy portfolio put into this extremely inefficient for the cost and inefficient in terms of the energy it provides, part of the energy portfolio is madness. And it's hard when you dig down into it and do a bit more detail. And really, when the penny drops, it's hard to see it, that it's just incompetence. It's hard not to see it as willful economic mismanagement, as a weaponized event. It really is. The destruction it's wrecking on this country is unbelievable. And when you think of it in terms of opportunity cost, it becomes even more clear. This money that we're spending on all of this net zero stuff, it could have been invested 10, 20 years ago into bringing more small scale nuclear onto stream. It could have been invested in even helping other countries more in a philanthropic nature. The billions that we've spent on it, even though I don't advocate for any extra spending in foreign aid, because I think there's some attention needs putting onto that, with giving aid to countries like India and China, which have actually got space programs. I think some attention needs doing there. But, let's ignore that and say we could have put another 5 billion onto foreign aid, which could have perhaps furthered the case for our better diplomatic relationships internationally or whatever. We could have even done that and actually helped other nations. So it's not just hurting us, it's hurting everybody. So I really hope the Farmers Movement Cornwall can just play our part in educating and putting our point of view across about this, and doing our bit to help derail the political juggernaut that the green agenda and specifically net zero has been. We need to dig down and find the bad stuff and get rid of it quickly.
Absolutely. Well, I think you've got a lot of support out there, Pete. Give us a reel of the best way to contact you. We've got the Facebook page, which is Cornwall Farmers Movement. Movement Cornwall. Sorry.
Farmers Movement Cornwall.
That's it, yeah. Right, okie dokie. And Telegram as well?
Yeah, same name on Telegram as well.
Right, okay. Well, it's been a real privilege, and the hour has flown by. Thank you so much, Pete. And I will see you again at the next one, I'm sure. But keep up the great work, my friend.
Thank you, Shelley. It's a pleasure.
Take care. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And I'll upload this to Rumble now. Thank you, Pete. Take care.
Yeah, good night.
Good night. And guys, I'll be back in a couple of weeks. It's already on Rumble. I don't know what I'm talking about. Some of you will see that I'm like a night early. I usually run on a Wednesday, but I couldn't wait for 2 weeks to get Pete's story out there. So I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Have a good week.